continuing our investigation into the gateless barrier, case 12. Ruiyan calls Master. Every day, Ruiyan Shiyan would call to himself, Master, and he would answer himself, Yes. Then he would say, Be awake, be alert, and reply, Yes. From now on, never be deceived by anyone. Yes, yes. Wumenguan says, this is such a difficult name. Ruiyan buys himself and sells himself. He brings forth lots of ghost faces and demon masks and plays with them. Why? Look! One calls, a second answers, a third is awake, and a fourth will not be deceived by anyone. If, however, you recognize and cling to any of them, you are mistaken. If you try to imitate Ruiyan, your discernment is altogether that of a wild fox. Wumenguan's verse says, Students of the way do not know truth. They only know their consciousness up to now. This is the source of endless birth and death. The fool calls it the original self. How wonderful to be giving a Dharma talk early in the day after a nice breakfast and some coffee. I feel like I've got some juice rather than in the evening after a work period and hiking or yoga where you've got to dig deep just to say anything. So it's really nice. And it's also very nice that this is the last sort of formal talk for the intensive period, that it should be this koan, which I just find so endearing. Such a wonderful demonstration and reminder. We also have this lovely day after a couple of days of rain and a sort of day that couldn't seem to decide, really. This morning, sunny right away in the morning, and then always here in Suk, when a day is going to be really hot, we have this sudden fog. The sun comes up and immediately we disappear into the cloud temple for a while. But it's only early still, 9:30 or so, and the fog is burned off and it's just straight sunny. So I think it's going to be a hot one today. And in a lot of ways, it's very much how I find intensive practice. We start into it clear right away, and then some fog kicks up. And if we just keep going straight with our practice, the fog burns off, and it really gets to be cooking. Ruiyan, in Japanese, it's no easier. It's Zuigan. Z-U-I-G-A-N. Zuigan. Calls Master. Every day, Ruiyan Shiyan would call to himself, Master, and he would answer himself, Yes. I've always read it this way, and I've always kind of heard it this way. This morning, thinking about this koan as I was sitting, just reflecting on it, I had this whole other dynamic come up, which was much more friendly. The voice is much more loving, like a husband and wife maybe, or partners. Master! Every day Ruiyan Xian would call to himself, Master! And he would answer himself, yes. Then he would say, be awake, be alert, and reply, yes. From now on, never be deceived by anyone. Yes, yes. The old couple who's been through this every day for the past, who knows, 50 years. And I think that when we investigate this koan, how we hear it or how we perceive this self-talk is important. And each of us will bring our own voices to it, and that's also important. The story with Ruiyan is that after he received his training, I think Ganto was his master. He received transmission from Ganto, and then he went off into the mountains where he practiced by himself for a long time, just sitting by himself. And so I imagine he did talk to himself. When Haku first came to live here for the training period, it was really the first time I realized how much I talked to myself. Because Haku would always be saying, what? Pardon? And I would say, Oh, nothing, just talking to myself. We have here, there's a lot of different ways that we can understand this case. And I think that with all cases, whenever you read commentaries, you'll have people talking about the case, you can understand it like that, but that's the lesser way of understanding it, or the real way of understanding it is like this. If you really want to know Zen, you should understand it like this. But I think it's important when we're doing our investigation or our study of koans that we don't dismiss any interpretation or understanding or way of seeing a koan. So one of the ways that we can really look at this is very superficially, I guess you could say. I guess I wanted to talk about just those layers of understanding and layers of approaching it. I've said before that one of the sort of things that we seem to admire greatly in our culture is quantity. When we have an education system, we set it up, and it seems really there's a lot of emphasis or importance placed on quantity. When I talk to students at university about what their experience is like or what they actually are doing at any given time, one of the things that I'm really shocked by is the quantity, particularly early in a person's education. You say, how many classes are you taking? And they tell you, and you say sort of, so what does that look like? What have you got to do? And, it's like, well, I've got to read 300 pages of this and 200 pages of that and 150 pages of this, and I've got to write an essay for each of those classes. And I say, that's a good course. And they say, no, this week. That's what I need to do this week. And I think, whoa, my God. And I think it must be razor thin what you're taking in from this course. Because you just, I don't know how you can process that much material to any depth. It's just like a stamp in or like a pillow marks on your face or something like that, where it's like, it's there for just a moment, but, by the time the course is over, you'd never know. You'd never know it happened. And this is the way that Zen practice is actually starting to come like this in the West as well. Even Zen practice. When you talk to people, every day, on Facebook, there's more books. Everybody is writing books. And even me, people have asked me if I have any books that I've written. And, the thought occurs to me from time to time, maybe I should write a book, because wouldn't it be great to be a Zen teacher and author? It would increase my marketing. I would be able to market myself more effectively if I was a Zen teacher and author. But then this sort of like feeling I start to feel nauseous, and I think, God, when I go to the bookstore and I open these books, I think, oh my God, really? I shouldn't say too much. This might go on the internet, so. It seems such a sad... at least maybe if people could publish them electronically so that trees aren't being killed for this purpose. But the way that often Zen was practiced, study is practiced traditionally in Zen, is just to take one book and really spend a lot of time with it. Read it from time to time. Let a couple of years of serious practice take place in between your readings of texts. And there are a few real cornerstones that I think are really valuable. And certainly one of them is this gateless barrier, the Wumenguan. There's a reason why it's such a core text in the Rinzai Zen school and Zen generally. There's a reason. And if you read it cover to cover, there's only 49 cases. It's not a huge text. Even with commentaries, you can have 5 or 6 different versions, and it's not such a long book to read, even with commentary. And so it's easy to read it and say, yeah, I read that. But what a waste that would be. When I was first starting practice, I've always been sort of I want to get to the point quickly. And so I sort of did some research into Zen Buddhism and Buddhism generally, and sort of said, well, what's the book? What's the big book, the one that, you need to understand to really get this? I was always focusing on, what do I need to do to get this stuff? And a number of great and well-respected teachers really praised the Lotus Sutra. And so I figured, well, let's quit the bullshit then, and let's, skip the Shunryu Suzuki and the Joko Becks and all those sort of fluffy fluffs that are Thich Nhat Hanh and all this modern namby-pamby business, and let's just cut right to the chase and go get the Lotus Sutra and read that. So I went out and I bought myself a really nice copy of the Lotus Sutra and sat down at my table and flipped it open to the first page and started reading it, and I had this amazing experience of falling completely asleep while sitting up after about a page. And but it was interesting and it was unusual because I consider myself fairly intelligent and able to understand things, but and I wasn't dissuaded easily and I wasn't put off easily, and I thought, well, I'm determined, I'm going to get through this thing. And so for months I would sit down and engage in this practice of reading the Lotus Sutra, where I would literally, start a paragraph, and it was like almost hypnotic, where I would read a paragraph, and then after about a half an hour, I'd realize that I've been reading the same paragraph for the whole time. And then I would just start to feel myself kind of falling asleep. And it just went at a crawling pace, and I don't think I got anything from the text at all, except that Buddhism was profoundly boring. And so I finished it, and I sort of checked that box and went, oh, bloody hell, thank God I'm done the Lotus Sutra. I've done it. I can say, I've read the Lotus Sutra. Great. I don't know what all the fuss was about, for sure. But, moving on. What's next? Shobo Genzo, maybe. I heard that's a good one, too. So anyways, in the meantime, started getting more and more involved in practice. And the first time I started the Lotus Sutra, I was living in Ontario, just practicing on my own, having read Kapleau's 3 Pillars of Zen. So Nikki and I moved to British Columbia, and I connected with the Victoria Zen Center, which was just a little sitting group, but then started to do sessions and more intensive practice with Eshu at the Zen Center of Vancouver, and doing our sessions on Galiano Island, and starting to do one-day intensives here. And my practice really ramped up. It was about 4 or 5 years later. And I don't know what it was, but for some reason I got out the Lotus Sutra again. And I started reading the Lotus Sutra again. And it was a totally different experience. It was like, when I started to read it, it was like electric. It was like energizing and deeply connected with the text. So much so that there were whole passages where I couldn't do anything but just cry. Just stuff was pouring out of me. There was like a purging. Nikki Nikki would be working and I would be at home. For many years we had these opposite shifts where I would go in the evenings and she would be coming home in the evening, and we'd sort of see each other for 10 minutes, and then I would go to my job and she would be at home for the evening. And so we had a great deal of time to ourselves, and so I would be reading this Lotus Sutra and she'd come home, and in the 10 minutes that we had, or half hour that we had of overlapping time, I would just be like vomiting all of this stuff. And it's like confessions about lies that I had told when I was like 12 years old, and the things that I had done, and just like it was like an exorcism or something like this. And Nikki would just be like, whoa, too much. It was like a cleansing. It was a very powerful experience. Same text. That's my only real point in telling the story, is to say that the experience of reading this text from one time to the other is that the text was the same book, right? The same ink on the same pieces of paper. And yet the experience or the insight into that book was completely different, because I was completely different. The practice, the experience of practice had totally transformed me. I had transformed through practice. And so the light of the Lotus Sutra was able to shine through much more clearly. Maybe I should pick up the Lotus Sutra again soon and see what's happening inside now. Although it might put me to sleep. Don't know. So the same way, the Wumenguan, each time we investigate it, we go deeper and deeper. And the first time we read this case, it's very easy to find it quite funny and sweet, and to really see it as a call. The master Ruiyan calling to himself, to remind himself just to be awake and alert, to be mindful, I guess you could say. But if that's as far as we take it, if that's as far as we go with this case, then we really do sell it short. When I was in training at Mount Baldy, was really, I had just started to hear about Thich Nhat Hanh, and his publishing was becoming more and more popular, and it was really the very beginning of what's become sort of called the mindfulness movement. And mindfulness in practice was really becoming popular, at least in the book world and in the sort of popular culture. Mindfulness. It's like a madness now, mindfulness madness. And I remember I was in the dining hall, and the person who was the Dentsu was reminding another of the servers to be mindful with how they were going about serving. And one of the Oshos, who was doing something else in the dining hall, stepped right into the conversation and said, mindfulness is the starting point. And they said, you've got to go beyond mindfulness to where you and the activity that you're engaged in are a manifestation of the cosmos. And the Dentsu was the person had been training for maybe 3 months or something like this, and so they were just trying to give a simple instruction. But this Osho stepped in and just slammed it down and said, we're not here to be mindful. Mindfulness is the starting point. Okay, that's great. Pay attention. Pay attention? Really? That's what we're here for? Pay attention. I guess things have deteriorated so badly that paying attention is just something we have to say. Maybe we need to deal with more power tools or something like that, where it goes without saying there are consequences if we're not mindful. It's a great place to start. But this is not Zen. And I think that just in this way, when we look at this case, we can say, oh yes, Master Ruiyan on one level is saying, be mindful. And that's good. But we have to dive into this case more deeply. Master, just this first call. Who is being called forth? At first, we think, oh, he's just calling to himself, and he's using the term master. Like I'm going to say, to myself, Osho. Hey, Osho. Huh? But, and that's one way that we can understand it. But if we go deeper, we can understand this master as the master that is beyond the subjective. And this has been pointed to by many teachers throughout time. Shakyamuni, the Buddha, referred to himself as Tathagata, and we talk about that in our chants, some of the chants that we do, Tathagata. The thus coming, the one who thus comes, the one who thus goes. It's beyond the personal. It's somewhat uncatchable, indescribable, unnameable. Lao Tzu calls it the Tao, the way. Rinji or Rinzai in Japanese refers to the true person of no rank. Genjo often uses the phrase the sage beyond our years. And it's this dynamic capacity, this infinite capacity that rests in the completeness of the cosmos, that knows our true capacity. We could call it our original home. Or sometimes I like to think of it as like the mind of the director. This is using a theatrical sort of perspective. Or even the sort of the playwright. The mind of the playwright. I'll get into that a little bit more. But what Ruiyan is calling forward is this cosmic perspective. This big perspective. When we wake up in the morning, as soon as we wake up, maybe we start to think about what's happening today, and I'm a little hungry, I need to eat, and I've got a list of tasks that I need to do, and I need to prepare for these things that are coming up. All of these things line up with our subjective perspective of ourself and our circumstances. They all affirm and connect this personality that we have, this idea of who it is that we think we are. And Ruiyan's call to himself, first thing, is a call punching through that subjective self to this vast perspective that says all of this is good. It's all well and fine, and it's necessary for us to have this personality. But don't be fooled by it. Don't be fooled into thinking that that's the limitation of experience, or that's the limitation of who it is that you are. Recognize the original mind. Recognize your origin. Recognize the vastness. Don't get sucked in by the concerns of self. This is what Ruiyan is calling to himself. Even as we go through our day, even as we're engaged in the activity of subjects and objects, even as we play our roles as students and employees and fathers and husbands and wives and customers and all of those roles that we have, don't get tricked. Don't get stuck or fixated in that role. Always remember the master. Always remember the cosmic self, or the mind of the writer, the origin. Genjo often says that you must be the master of your own practice. When we come to a zendo, when we take on a guide, the role that they play is often to stand in, to be an experienced eye of practice. So as we stumble along in our practice, as we hit roadblocks and things, we can go and meet a teacher, and the teacher can reflect it back or can offer a perspective, ideally from the position of this absolute subject, this position of the cosmic perspective, a bigger perspective. Is very, very valuable to have that. But it's not enough. And as we stumble forward in practice, as we clarify our own I, and as we have the experience of our own practice, the I of your teacher is always it can be very clear, but it can never be as clear as your own eyes for your own practice. can become. So we work with a teacher and we have this opportunity to go back and forth, and we stumble around in the dark, and our teacher helps us work our way forward more and more and more. But essentially what we have to do is to awaken the master. We have to embody the sage beyond our years. We have to manifest this true person without rank in our own body, in our own experience. We have to open our own eyes and be able to see our own practice and our own mind. Because it's only then that our practice can really, we can really take responsibility for our own practice. When a long time ago, I once asked a teacher, what does it mean to become an Osho? And, I thought, it means, you can become a Zen teacher, or you can take on responsibility for a community, or you can, get cool robes, or all these kinds of things. Yeah, go ahead. But the answer that I got was quite surprising. It was that becoming an Osho means that your teacher feels like you've kind of got the hang of it, that you can be trusted to go forward in your practice independently, that your eye is becoming clear enough and your practice is committed enough that set out onto your own, you will continue the practice of awakening. Now I think that that's a pretty good standard, a pretty good description. It's like taking the training wheels off, becoming an Osho. Wumen, let's get into this case a little bit. So, the case part, every day Ruiyan Shiyan would call to himself, Master, and he would answer himself, yes, 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 honey. Then he would say, be awake, be alert, and reply, oh yes. From now on, never be deceived by anyone. From now on, always from now on. We aspire to this never being fooled, never being deceived. We aspire to be awake and alert. And yet sometimes we are not so clear. We do get attached. We do make mistakes. And our practice in Zen is not to beat ourselves up about that, to doubt ourselves because of that. It's not to ignore it either. Recognizing, acknowledging our mistakes and our attachments, because they're wonderful opportunities to see where we got stuck, where we slipped up. But our practice is always to commit, to recommit, to stepping forward from this moment. And now, I won't be deceived. Old Ruiyan buys himself and sells himself. He brings forth lots of ghost faces and demon masks and plays with them. Why? This is Wumen. Wumen is always a tricky devil. Sometimes he's praising people and it's just insulting. And sometimes he's criticizing people, and you couldn't ask for higher praise. Old Ruiyan buys himself and sells himself. He's pulling out a drama sort of theatrical image here, and that's just so. Each of us throughout the course of the day wears many masks. Ghosts and demons and lovers and bosses and servants, and all of those masks are things that we wear. And it's wonderful in many ways, because this is the power or the capacity of what it is to be a human being and to be a bodhisattva, is the capacity for this master, this true person without rank, to transform appropriately for the circumstances that are arising. Why? Look! One calls, a second answers, a third is awake, and a fourth will not be deceived by anyone. However, if you recognize and cling to any of them, you are mistaken. Yeah, this is a really crucial point, because I think all of psychology and most people recognize the capacity for us to wear different masks. And it's necessary. It's encouraged. We all acknowledge that in different circumstances we wear a different mask. But what I find is that for most of us, there is a mask that we most love. There is a mask that we are most comfortable with, that we are most familiar with. There is a mask that we really, when truth comes to it, is the one that we retreat to. It is the character we most commonly play. And when we're honest, it is the character that we believe is I. And oftentimes, I like to use this sort of metaphor, this analogy. Oftentimes, we find ourselves in certain circumstances. And we have a whole selection of masks, or if you like, we have a whole selection of players at our disposal. And a situation arises, and we have the opportunity to put on a mask, or, if you like, to call forward an actor. So if we have a fight scene, we have an opportunity to call forth the sort of fighter, actor, and send him into the scene. But we kind of have this prima donna mask or character or actor. That's the one we're comfortable in. And so oftentimes, while it might be more effective to send in that other actor, that other character, to go and play that fight scene, it's kind of uncomfortable. And that prima donna character, that primary, that actor we think of as our home and as our self, sometimes it would be much easier for us to send in that character. That one wants to go and do the fight scene. Maybe it won't be as good or as clear. But because that's the seat that we take up, because that's where we are attached, that's who wants to go out and play. Likewise, the scene calls for a lover, and we have the beautiful young ingenue that we can send out, or we can go out in this character we think of as ourselves. And the scene may not be as effective, but it's more comfortable than transforming. It's more comfortable than sending out someone else. It's more comfortable than completely changing the mask. This is what this case points to very subtly, but very clearly is it's a first step to recognize that as human beings we manifest in many characters. This is true. But what is our original face? Which one of these characters is the real us? The real me? My real nature? Who is it that Ruiyan is calling to when he calls forward the master? Is it the lover? Is it the dualist? Is it the spy? Is it the murderer? Is it the victim? Is it that character that we think of as me, the real me, with all of the things that I like and don't like? What this case points to is that in our practice, we have to step beyond. We have to step beyond even our favorite character, even our favorite player, even our favorite prima donna, even this character we think of as me, and recognize this fundamental position. I like to call it the director's seat, or the playwright's seat. When we step into this position, we come into balance, because we have the perspective of the whole scene, the whole picture. We have to come to rest in the complete capacity of what it is to be manifest as a human being. And from this position, we can witness life unfolding. We can witness the circumstances and experiences that we are meeting unfolding. And we can make a call from this perspective of who goes forward, recognizing that all of these aspects are our true nature, manifestations of our true nature, not stuck on one or the other. There's a free functioning, a seamless demonstration that manifests when we rest in this perspective. Old Ruiyan buys himself and sells himself. He brings forth lots of ghost faces and demon masks and plays with them. Why? Look! One calls, a second answers, a third is awake, and a fourth will not be deceived by anyone. If, however, you recognize and cling to any of them, you are mistaken. Recognizing, oh, that's me. Oh, that's me. That's the real me. That's who I am. That's the kind of person I am. If you try to imitate Ruiyan, your discernment is altogether that of a wild fox. This is also an important point. This realization, or this stepping beyond character, is something that can't be faked. Or what happens is that you're ghosting, you're stepping into a character, much as I've described, through the prima donna. Oh, this one needs a lover. I can play the lover. Out onto stage you clop. Like a sumo wrestler in heels, it comes off. Oh, how strange. That's odd. That doesn't quite fit. I see what they're going for. But maybe they've got the wrong character. We know what we need to do. We know the instruction. We know the direction that we need to take. But the first step is actually letting go of our fixation, our obsession with that single player, the me. The perspective that I take as being the one and true I am. A wild fox. This is an old... the fox is so mistreated, I think, in old Chinese and Japanese mythology. It's so colorful and disappears and reappears. Tricky. And this is what it's saying. If you imitate it, you might be tricky enough to fool some people into thinking you're a Zen adept. But the primary person that you're fooling is just yourself. This transformation, this going beyond, has to be genuine. Maybe a teacher with a clear eye will be able to tell the difference, but certainly, if you take the time to clarify your own eye, you'll be able to tell the difference in your own manifestation. Wumen's verse says, "Students of the way do not know truth. They only know their consciousness up to now." And this is what I've been talking about, essentially. We have to be very careful. It's the first layer, the first slice, is just to really recognize the innumerable characters that we play. And I think that many people come to realize this, come to clarify the different characters that they play, and stop. Oh yes, now I'm being this and now I'm being that. But they never stop to question the I'm being part. Who is it that is being? The who we take as being our true nature. We take as arising from emptiness. But if we take a moment and look at where we're coming from, so often this who is just another one of the masks. It's just another character that we have become comfortable in. We've become safe, we feel safe in. And so rather than truly transforming, rather than truly arising out of emptiness, out of our original home, we just morph, change a little bit, put a little makeup on, and make do. This carries with it results or sort of in the Buddhist cosmology, when we arise from emptiness and manifest, this is an activity that generates very little waves. It's like, to carry the theatrical metaphor, when somebody steps out on stage and is so completely immersed in the role, in the character, in the scene, in what's happening, nothing else distracts. The fact that the situation is completely fabricated and is on a stage for entertainment never even occurs to us. It's real. It's completely flawless and seamless. No distraction. No external spillover energy. Nothing comes out of that except just that one act. Likewise, when we arise clearly out of this emptiness, the results have very little spill. They don't generate big waves, karmic waves, to look at it from a traditional kind of way. When we act out of self, when we act out of that one fixated character, it's like the amateur actor who can't stop tugging their clothing or wiping their nose. They can't fully step into the character, and so for the people watching, we can't believe it. And then we're distracted by the poor set and the uncomfortable seats and the low-quality food that's served beforehand. Likewise, when we act out of that character, it generates all kinds of static, all kinds of causes which generate all kinds of effects. And in sort of Buddhist cosmology, that kind of an act just keeps the wheel of samsara rolling along. This is the source of endless birth and death. The fool calls it the original self. Whenever I talk like this, I always think of John Wayne. John Wayne. Many people call him a really great actor. I think there's probably other people like that too. But anyways, they've been in many, many movies. Keanu Reeves, he's another modern one. Yeah. Many movies, and many people say, "Oh, what a great actor." But whenever I watch movies with John Wayne and Keanu Reeves, all I see is John Wayne and Keanu Reeves. It's just like, it was a different story, but it's the same guy. Different story, but the same guy. And they call it acting. And to me, this is what Wumen is pointing to with this verse. Is we, if we're not genuine in our practice, if we don't step beyond this individual character of self, that's kind of what we're doing. Is we're calling that acting. And if you've seen acting, if you've seen someone like I don't know, a personal favorite of mine is like Ben Kingsley. When you've seen somebody completely transform, arising out of zero, emptiness, seen complete transformation, seen what it is to act, what it is to manifest our true nature, then when we call that acting, when we use the same name for both performances, both demonstrations, oh, my heart hurts a little bit. Students of the way do not know truth. They only know their consciousness up to now. This is the source of endless birth and death. The fool calls it the original self. few last words, another way of understanding this final thing, maybe to tie it in. I'm just trying to figure out how to say this. Each of the characters that we play, we have a place for them. Certain ones that we really like and are comfortable with, and certain that we don't really like to see. We like to be the successful hero. We don't like to be the victim. In Shakespeare, one of the real devices that he often used was the character of the fool. Likewise, in Buddhism, sometimes this word fool comes up. And often in Buddhism, it's used in very much the same way as it is in Shakespeare. Sometimes Wumen or other Zen masters will load up what we aspire to, the hero with his armor and with his weapons and with his gold and with his kingdom. And this is what we sometimes aspire to: success and wealth and glory. But there's a lot of complexity in that. There's a lot of intellection in that. There's a lot of pride and arrogance and attachment in that. And so oftentimes we can look at the fool as our example. And in Zen, it really is the model of this simple way of being. Nobody accounts for the fool who has nothing, who owns nothing. There's no importance in society or culture, has no opinion. Their life is often entirely dismissible. And yet in Shakespeare, it is the fool who often speaks with the voice of the author, the voice of wisdom, the voice of insight. So each of us, as we practice, each of us as we engage in our manifestation of our different masks and characters, we must always come back to this voice, this origin, this the director's seat, or the master, the true person of no rank. If we're to practice Zen, we have to develop the eye to see it. We have to develop the voice to speak it. We have to develop the body to arise completely transformed out of the origin. Or else we're just play acting. We're just bad actors. And I think the world already has enough of those. So thank you all for your efforts this week. We have we have the rest of the day to practice. We're going to work together, building hermitage, eating food, doing zazen, and sharing this time of practice, this space of practice together, investigating our original nature. So thank you for taking the time to do it. And please keep it up for the rest of the time that we have together. Thank you.